Sorry. Okay, I am really flying by the seat of my pants into the new year here with makes and setups, so okay. Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. There is a beautiful layer of snow outside on the ground, so I thought this might be just a nice little K-Bats craft video. We can sit by the faux fire, have a nice little chat about one of my latest makes. And yes, you know, impromptu, spontaneous is the word for this project. I had no intention of making it, and then it came together very quickly, actually, 3-4 days. I began to rush and really focus on it because I thought, oh, what a great Christmas debut. But then we actually had, you know, some sick holiday delays, so then it was more than finished, and then I was sitting and waiting to be able to dress up and celebrate. So I wanted to talk about a little bit of the construction and where I go from here. I have, the skirt is finished, and I have some material left, and I want to make a matching vest. And I've kind of hit a little problem spot with that, so hopefully we can get that figured out. We'll see. Yes, I'm still wearing Halloween pants in January. Don't at me, please. Okay. Now, this whole impetus for this skirt started because I have so much red fabric that I didn't know what to do with it. And you may recall this lovely bonnet, and this is kind of flat, but it is meant to be a muff, and this is the matching vest. Oh gosh, whoa now, this is a cape. I spoke about all these last Christmas, or the Christmas before. Yeah, pre-plague. Sorry, pre-plague. We have no concept of time here. This was pre-plague. So I shall link to all this information previously. But I have a lot more of this material. I used to use this as a backdrop. And I had cut the sections of the roll to make some curtains. And then in one of my thrift videos, I had actually bought some really great red curtains. So I was going to hush up my dining room a little bit because I thought we were going to have some holiday shenanigans that turned out to not happen anyway. And I hung up the red store-bought curtains. So I said, what else can I do with this fabric? So I said to myself, well, gee, I would love to make a skirt out of it because it's just so luscious. And I knew that I had already made these outerwear kind of garments. But I had also already made some cushions out of this material, and I thought I kind of don't want to match my house. That may just be a little too much, right? So I still have this fabric. So I went to my drawer, my red fabric drawer. Well, yeah, sorry. And I do have this absolutely delicious. I bought this at a local fabric shop that was closing. And it wasn't a super percentage off, but I bought what was on the bolt. There might be 6 or 7 yards here, I think. And I really want to make a really grand, luscious gown with this. I have some really wonderful black trim that I would love to sort of just accentuate kind of a collar for this. So this I thought was just too lovely, too much. But it's actually, of course, as you can see, extremely similar but different, and these are not the materials that I used. Hold on. This is the material that I used. Can you see the difference? Can you? You know that you're beginning to hoard, and we all have that expression that, and I've said this before, this is why I've done the thrift videos, to build up your craft closet so you have supplies on hand. And you go through a fine line of, I have the supplies, I don't want to use everything, and we begin to hoard. And I actually had 2 drawers of different types of red fabrics. And they're all so much alike. And this I gotten at the local Joann's when they were open. And it was about 4 yards, I think, just on the last of a clearance bolt. And, you know, I can't tell if these materials, you know, are so similar that they go together, or do they clash? I don't know. But I said, well, for just a fun, festive skirt, let me go with this kind of really cute pin tuck kind of satin. So that way I don't match my cushions. And then I get to save this beautiful luxury fabric that I actually have so much more of for some kind of major kind of gown, really elegant kind of project that would really be planned out and would really take its time. So, okay. So obviously I did not go by the seat of my pants with this, but I did not film anything about it in advance while I was doing it because I thought I had to rush and get it done. I used this pattern actually, which is just your stereotypical faux historic. Again, I was working with limited material. I wasn't sure how much I had, but I did not want to just do a gather at the waist square as I had done with my previous two Halloween dresses, because I wanted it to be a more of this historical kind of bell-shaped kind of silhouette. And of course this is a more Renaissance-y kind of medieval, Tudorish, Ren Fair kind of feeling to it. And I love the shape of the skirt because I feel like it works with a variety of silhouettes. Now, I was thinking more of a Victorian kind of Christmas, but I do also love kind of ye olde, kind of Tudor style Christmas. So this pattern was very straightforward. Just one front center panel, two side panels, and then two back panels. And I was fairly good with grain this time around. I could lay out all the pieces that I needed going correctly with my fabric as it should, except for one back panel. I knew I was not going to be able to finitely match this kind of X crisscross kind of pattern, which was fine because it's so gathered and so full that that's not necessarily important for this kind of project. If I think about it too much, though, maybe it will probably bother me. And I also needed to make the waistband as well, and there were a few spots where I was short on the waistband where I did have to piece patchwork together, but at the top of the waistband with that kind of crisscross pattern, you don't see it. So I did have to kind of organize my panels correctly, except for one that I had to do sort of on a kind of off kind of bias kind of angle to make it fit. So that one did have a slight more of a little fray line to it, and I did this all by hand. I don't know why. I probably could have done it in half the time if I'd done it in the machine, but just being able to sit in a chair and, you know, watch some Christmas movies. And my husband said that, you know, did I enjoy sewing because it seemed very tedious. I said, well, it can be, but at the same instance you do see the sign of accomplishment as every stitch is made. You can see how far you've come in the project. So all these seams I was able to just do a nice fold under kind of finish to them. So they're not completely perfectly sort of felled French seamed kind of finished, but they, as I said, they weren't fraying very much. And initially I was not going to line it, but then I kind of realized, not sure if it actually shows here, but there is a little bit of a little punch hole line where these seams are, where this probably was not meant to be a fashion fabric. Initially I thought I did not need a liner because it would be a cold weather kind of skirt that I would be wearing some other kind of skirt, pant, or legging underneath. But I rooted around in my stash, of course, and I found some black chiffon. What is this? Here's more scraps. Once I saw how much of the red fabric I had also, I was able to get all these panels to one side and be able to have one square, more than a half a yard left, which that's where I got the idea to make a vest. I knew I could not make a dress in time, and finishing the skirt itself went fairly easy, and then doing the liner was what added on the time to it. But I knew I was not going to be able to make a proper dress in what I thought was going to be the rush for Christmas. And I know I did not have enough fabric. But I wanted to go with a vest because I thought a vest, again, maybe seemed like a more Victorian silhouette to me. And that's where I am at that point, struggling with that shape. And again, trying to work with minimum material. But I actually had a couple of these just little chiffon remnant rolls. And I've used 2 for the lining. And I have a little stray piece here after. These were only a couple dollars each. I don't know if they were rolls that I all grabbed at the same time, or if they were ones that I just immediately, every time I was apparently at the Joann's, all of a sudden grabbed a chiffon black remnant, as one is wont to do. The black liner is not necessarily as full with yardage as the red skirt. This was more of, I put the 2 remnants, they were again not quite yard each, probably odd, like 6.6 or 6.8 yards, whatever maths people. I just put these 2 together and then did a gather at the top to match. So these aren't necessarily matchy, but there is enough flow and support. And then, if you're looking at this quite wonderfully, you can see, I initially just thought, okay, let me just have a privacy sheer. But when I did this gathering, here was the gathering together, so you can see that I gathered the skirt and then the black with it. I realized that this black overlay on this red is really kind of awesome. But I was just like, okay, the fun red festive, but then when I turned it over, so you can kind of see on the camera angle, at some points it just looks like straight black, but then there are other angles that you can see that there's just this wonderful kind of red accent underneath, and I absolutely adore that. I was tempted, where the heck is my thread? Here it is. I was tempted to do all the black in this same magenta. You know, my nephew said that this was maroon, and I agree that this is maroon, and I agree that this is more of a magenta, but this was the red thread that I used everywhere. And I was tempted to do it also on the black, that I thought that would make a really great contrast. But on the black, for me, this just looked entirely too pink. But I love the way the skirt has sort of just this wonderful shiny dimension texture to it. And then once I saw this lovely sheen of the red and the black together, oh, there you go. Oh, yes. Yes. I decided, actually, ironically, this is actually quite reversible, which I completely lucked into that. I did not intend to do that. So, in a pinch, in a couple days, I could have made the skirt just for holiday, like a costume, and be done with it. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make something that was slightly wearable and practical. And I wear also red in the fall. So this was something that I thought could last me sort of the whole 4th quarter. And again, I love the silhouette, that the silhouette can be sort of Tudor style, it can be sort of Victorian style, it can just be whatever plain skirt I want it to be. It has a lot of versatility. And then when I saw this, well, I had already done these black seams. And again, because this was the more delicate kind of chiffon, I did do a sort of fold over and a turn under to hide any of the kind of fray seam, because again, I was just working with an odd remnant, and there might be places where you can see some of a little bit of the stringy that comes with it. But I had already done the inner seams, so that way the inner seams of the black liner, they did not match exactly where the seams lined up on the skirt, but that all the seams were inside, that there were not any seams showing on the outside or that there were seams on the inside against me. Am I making sense? I don't know. So, but with that finished seam on the inside, again, that also made this reversible. And initially, as you can see, this stopped this black remnant. So that was when I went into the third remnant and did this wonderful little ruffle, which was the most complicated part, believe it or not. Can you see it on the on the goofy camera here? I had to go under, oopsie, there's a little bit of a string. That's from something else. We'll discuss that. I had to cut the third remnant into strips because I didn't expect to get enough to make it sort of twice as much for a really great ruffle. So it's about 1.5 times as much. And I had already finished the exterior of the skirt with this kind of binding. This was my sort of go-to 1.5 inch black. I'm actually almost done this roll. I was going to do this the same on this hem, but that actually would have, I run out of this roll, I would have been short. So I actually cut this 1.5 inch ribbon in half in order to get my binding, sorry, it's black on black, you can't quite see, in order to get my binding tape finish on the ruffle. So I did this binding in black, just as a final end to the skirt, because I thought I'm going to be wearing black shoes, and I did not want to leave the satin here. This is probably not a real, you know, silk or taffeta kind of polyester kind of mix. This was where I was down to the selvage of the fabric, and I didn't just want to do my usual a tuck and a turn under, because then the skirt would get, you know, dirty or damaged or something at the end, and then, oh, in order to correct it, all of a sudden you have to keep turning up again and turning it up again. So this kind of binding just protects it a little better and just brings everything sort of cohesively to a nice finish. And again, I'm hoping to finish the vest that I would like to make to coordinate with this. I'm also hoping to just use some of this binding to finish, so we'll see about that. I don't know. So this skirt was done quite easily, and with this binding already. And then I gathered my ruffle, attached my ruffle. No, I actually did the binding on the ruffle first before the gather, because that would have been really difficult to do after. And even in some spots, I was so fed up at that point where I just left some spots of this. I could fold over and finish as well, and other spots here where the cut was a little off, I could not. So, big shocker, I just left it the way it was. But then, when I put the skirt on, of course, you wear the skirt, and I kept looking down at it, and I kept thinking, could I see the dust ruffle underneath? Or was I just looking at binding, the binding on binding? And I couldn't quite tell. And I put it on my dress form, and I couldn't quite tell. I wasn't sure. And I asked my husband, I said, do you see the ruffle peeking out from behind here? And he said, well, maybe. So there were a few places here where I actually did go back, and it does not look perfect. But it was in the back where I just kind of picked up a little bit of a dress catch, all these together, in order to just take this ruffle up maybe just another 1/4 inch. So that doesn't necessarily look super pretty, but all the kind of ruffle is together, so it doesn't quite matter. So, because I took the little bit of extra, here was where my back seams actually met up together, which works nicely. But because I just tried to take a little bit of extra time consuming, once I discovered I had the time, again, because we had all sick delays, nobody was actually here on Christmas, then I was able to say, well, then I could finish the liner properly and then actually get a zany 2 looks for the price of 1. I love the sound that this makes. It may sound so silly, but I love the sound. The waistband here went quite well at first. You know that there's always probably got to be seemingly setbacks. It was a little short. You can even see some parts here where I had to kind of fudge this seam line. There's another spot here where material wasn't enough. This was just this one side edge where I had cut all my panels. And there is one seam, yeah, that is it, kind of in the center. It's not quite the center, it's slightly off, but you don't really notice it when I'm wearing it. And this one piece in the back was short. It was on the tapered angle from where I had cut the skirt. So I had to use another piece where I actually just sewed them together before I put the flap down to sort of conceal all my gathered encased in the waistband. And I did do a nice stitch at the top just to keep it secure also, because, where is it? I used some of my horsehair braiding to stiffen this up, and you can see that it stays in the stiff shape. This was the stuff I had in my wish list. I just bookmarked it for when I needed it, and last year my husband got it for me, saying, I don't know why you want it, but whatever. And this is the type of thing for which it's supposed to be used. And I did it double to make sure it was really nice and sturdy. And then here, through my giant button jar, I did find a really cute, I love that it was, I thought it was a little bit more of a brown, but yet it just matches so perfectly. Can you see? This nice giant little button. The pattern actually strangely calls for a zipper up the back, which I thought, well, so much for your historical silhouettes if you're using a zipper. And at first, not sure, yes, you can see right here. At first I put the button here, and I made my buttonhole. One thing I have also realized about the vest that I intend to make, I like to just have a few buttons down the front, but I'm not going to line my buttonhole side with the horsehair liner, because I know you're not going to be able to see this, but when I cut into the horsehair liner to make my buttonhole, it just left a little bit of like the little prickly kind of braiding kind of material through the hole, which on the back of here, this was a big thing, a big buttonhole to go with my big button. It doesn't really matter, I'm not going to feel it, but I feel like down the front of a vest, I'm going to constantly notice that kind of little itchy, little prickly stuff is there. And I don't necessarily love the buttonhole. It is kind of ugly and gnarly. Again, I feel like when you double, quadruple up that magenta, maybe it shows just a little too much pink on pink for me. I made my buttonhole, and I had my button originally here. And when I put on the skirt, it was actually a little too big. and that was kind of okay that it sunk a little low around my hips. I didn't mind that. But this waistband just was a little too sturdy, actually, where it kind of stuck out. And gals maybe who are into Kardashian kind of silhouettes, or anybody who understands when you play hockey and you have like a hockey butt, like a shelf like Sidney Crosby back there, you end up with that kind of gap in the back. And at first I kind of, I had panic. Like, oh no, this was the last thing, the only thing that I had to do, put a button on a skirt, and it didn't come out right. That everything was wrong, and everything was ruined, that I didn't do the waistband right, but even though I did everything I was supposed to do, I had the right size, and I did the lining properly, and I hid all my dirty sewing seams, inside the waistband, and I did everything. What did I do wrong? And then it just occurred to me, I could just move the button over an inch. And it's so silly, because that is one of the, when we buy store pants or skirts, fast fashion kind of materials, sometimes, when we have muff and tuff issues that we understand, sometimes we think it's quite easy to move a button over, or to move a button over the other way sometimes. But it was literally the last thing that I thought to do, of maybe if I just move the button and I take it in a couple inches. Because at first I thought that I might need some kind of placket if I wasn't doing a zipper, just another little shield kind of, even though I have my liner comes up here as well. And my liner, yes, one side here was actually a little longer, and I just did a bunch to finish the gather, so it just makes my lining actually a little more fuller in the back. But this button also, because I moved it over, I do have a little bit of nice kind of tuck kind of coverage. It is still a little big, I think. And there is, again, another solution to do that. If I have to do so, I could simply do one of a taper kind of tuck take in here at the sides, or maybe on one of the seams that I already have in the waistband. But I do like having some options where I can wear it a little higher up, or I can let it drape kind of low. Because I had this extra gather material and the way I move the button, I do have a little bit of it, not a full-on kind of bustle, but just a little bit of more gathered material in the back. And I like this pattern. I'll probably use this pattern again. I think it would be really fun because I actually have this exact same material in gray. I actually think it would be really fun to make the exact same skirt and actually properly document my materials. But I love that this is just that bell shape. I mean, this little pullover and that little gather does create a little bit of floof, and there is a little bit of the back panels having a little bit of a taper, but it's not a complete train. A lot of the patterns that I have that are costume or Victorian, or actually some of those bridal patterns that I was looking at, they all have really exaggerated trains that I have to adjust because I'm short anyway. So you can see where some of this, where I cut this material, actually is kind of ugly. But to me, I don't care what's ugly on the inside. If something's done correctly, maybe it'll look prettier. But even don't be discouraged if something is done pretty and it still comes out it's proper, but it's not pretty if it's kind of ugly. To me, it's what gets the job done and whatever works. So I have one complete skirt, and now I'm struggling with a problematic vest. So this is where you can see that this is actually still kind of loose. I wasn't looking to make a skirt that was uber tight because obviously of gut issues. I did not want any kind of muffin top, and I've said this before, it's easier to work with something once it's too big, but there's nothing you can do when it's too small. If I decide I want it to stay higher, that is where I may take and do a little bit of a taper kind of take in on the seams of the waistband. I don't necessarily think I will do that in the back because if you can kind of see, I like the way that button move over, and that little bit of extra gathering there has kind of made a little bit of a tweaky. Maybe that little bit of back kind of fluff in the back kind of balances out any kind of little gut in the front. So I do like this as is. I like the versatility. I'm not one to so strictly adhere to trying to get something historically accurate or using historical methods. Half the time I don't even necessarily use correct methods. I just want to get the job done, and whichever way works best for me. Sometimes that's the correct way, sometimes it's best to do things properly. Other times there is no right or wrong way, it's whatever way is best for you. So for something that came together in 4 days, I think this is pretty awesome. This is something that I can dress up with some really dramatic, vampire gothic red and black come Halloween, but then it is also something that's quite wonderfully Christmassy and festive-y. I tend to be more of a purple person in the winter, post-Christmas, but I don't know, this is more, maybe it is more magenta that kind of carries through with that. Maybe it does kind of match the cape and the bonnet that I made of the similar but different material. So I love that it's something that the more versatile it is, it is something that I'm more likely to use, something that I'm more likely to wear more often, as opposed to a costume that you make for one thing or a historical thing that you make for one specific thing, and then it just goes in the closet and just sits there. I was going to take this outside and do some beautiful things in the snow, but I don't know that this is exactly waterproof. Sorry, can't help myself.